Historic conflicts.
A nation barely a century old split in two. The map of America, once whole, now burns with red and blue. Lines of fire carving through the land, setting brother against brother. On one side, the North, industrial and growing, its cities humming with invention and ambition. On the other, the South, vast and rural, where cotton fields stretch beneath the sun and old traditions hold tight. Between them, a chasm of belief, each side certain, each side afraid. Why did a young nation tear itself apart? What force could turn neighbors into enemies, friends into foes, and make Americans raise arms against their own? The answer lies buried in the tangled roots of the past, a story of ideals and of wounds unhealed. On fields shrouded with morning mist, soldiers gather. Their faces are young, their eyes filled with worry, hope, and doubt. They clutch letters from home, tokens of a world that already feels distant. Some wear blue, others gray. But beneath the fabric, their hearts beat with the same fear. As the sun rises, the land trembles. Gettysburg, Antietam, Shiloh, names that will be written in blood and memory. At Gettysburg, the air thickens with smoke and screams. Cannons thunder, tearing through lines of men who rush forward, only to fall in the tangled grass. On Little Round Top, desperate hands claw at rock and earth, fighting for every inch. The wheat field runs red, and the cries of the wounded echo through the hills. Antietam, America's bloodiest single day. The cornfield, once golden, becomes a graveyard. The Dunker Church stands silent, its white walls stained with the cost of war. Here, in a few short hours, thousands are lost. Young men with futures unfulfilled, dreams shattered before they could unfold. At Shiloh, the forest is ablaze with musket fire. The Tennessee River watches, indifferent, as men stumble and fall. The peach orchard is torn apart, perfumed with blossoms and death. Night falls, but the sounds do not stop. The moans, the prayers, the desperate calls from mothers far away. Through slow motion and shadows, the absurdity becomes clear. Americans killing Americans. Faces flash by, some barely more than boys. Eyes wide with terror, hands trembling on rifle stocks. They are fighting not just for land or leaders, but for ideas, freedom, autonomy, the right to live as they believe. Yet the cost is beyond what anyone could have imagined. What drove this madness? The heart of the conflict beats with contradictions. The North and South, bound together by history, had grown apart. In the North, industry thrived, cities swelled, and a new vision of progress took hold. In the South, life remained tied to the land, to the rhythms of planting and harvest, and above all, to a system built on the backs of enslaved people. Slavery, America's original sin, stood at the center. For the South, it was the foundation of their way of life, their economy, and their sense of honor. For the North, it had become a moral outrage, a blight that stained the nation's promise of liberty. Politics grew poisonous, debates turned to threats, and compromise seemed impossible. Economics fanned the flames, tariffs, trade, the future of new states, all became battlegrounds. Each side saw the other as a threat to its survival. And as the nation expanded westward, the question loomed, would this new land be free or slave? Autonomy became a rallying cry. The South, fearing the loss of its rights and traditions, chose secession, breaking away to form a new country, the Confederate States of America. The North, led by Abraham Lincoln, refused to accept the fracture, determined to preserve the Union at all costs. And so war, 4 years of struggle, pain, and sacrifice. More than 600,000 lives lost, a generation torn apart. Cities burned, families shattered, landscapes scarred. The war touched every home, every heart. Yet from this agony, something new was born. The Emancipation Proclamation, delivered in the midst of war, declared freedom for those enslaved in rebellious states. The nation's wounds were deep, but the idea of equality began to take root. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, marking a turning point, one paid for with blood. But peace did not come easily. The years that followed were a time of reconstruction and reckoning. The South lay in ruins, its people struggling to rebuild. Freedmen sought their place in a society that had denied their humanity. The promise of freedom was fragile, threatened by violence and resistance. Yet slowly, painfully, the country began to heal. Its future forever changed. The lessons of the Civil War are not locked in dusty books or fading photographs. They speak to us still in the language of loss and hope. They remind us that freedom and equality do not come from victory alone, but from awakening after pain. It is not the banners or the battles that define a nation, but the courage to face its darkest truths and emerge stronger. To the young, the story of the Civil War is not just a tale of blood and battlefields. It is a warning and an invitation. History is not just a record of suffering. It is a call to vigilance, to empathy, to understanding. The divisions that once tore a nation apart can rise again if left unchecked. The dreams of liberty and justice require constant care, and the cost of forgetting is always too high. Look into the faces of those who fought, Union and Confederate alike. See the humanity, the fear, the hope. Remember that they were not so different from us. Their sacrifices demand more than remembrance. They call for reflection. What kind of country do we wish to build? What lines will we draw and what bridges will we build across them? In the end, the Civil War is a story of transformation. A nation shattered but not destroyed. A people tested by fire, searching for a better way. The fields of Gettysburg and Antietam are quiet now. Their scars softened by time. Yet their lessons endure, etched in stone, whispered in the wind, waiting for each new generation to listen. Freedom and equality do not come from victory, but from awakening after pain. The American Civil War reminds us that history is not just blood, it is a warning for the future. We must remember and we must learn. Brother versus brother, the war that changed America. Thank you for respecting history. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and write the bell so you don't miss any battles.